Hi everybody, and a warm welcome back to the painting channel. Today I'm going to be following on from some of last week's ideas, so let's roll that intro. Let's see what it's all about. Okay, so last week, if you remember, we were talking all about subdividing your paper up into smaller sections. I showed you it in quarters, but you could make any size that you wanted to. The idea was that you did a lot more practice before you launched yourself into a major large-scale piece of work. So the thing is, this week I wanted to take that whole idea a little further and show you some of the processes that I do when it comes to creating some products for my gallery. Now, over the last year, I've been creating a lot of abstracts, and I've been doing large format abstracts and medium format abstracts, but I've also done some mini abstracts, just like some of these. And I wanted to show you the process of creating small paintings, once again by subdividing up the paper, creating these sort of random paintings and abstract effects and forms, and it doesn't have to remain as abstracts. You can do anything you like, from florals, even montage, decoupage, any of these things. There's so many different ways to create on small scraps, and the point about all of that is that once it's done, you can turn them into gifts or sale items, products. In my case, I do a lot of these size, as I showed you here, as greetings cards, and they go on sale either on my website or indeed through my Etsy shop, or indeed mainly through my gallery in Hythe. So before we go any further, it's not going to be a short video, it's going to be quite lengthy. I do hope that you enjoy it and you get something from it, and I catch each of you at the other end of the process. Take care. Enjoy this afternoon's video, and I certainly am going to have a heap of fun with it, I assure you. Now, following on from last week's demonstration where I talked about subdividing your paper up and using it as practice pieces for a much larger work, therefore you gain a little bit more knowledge, understanding, and indeed some degree of confidence to tackle a bigger picture. And if you ruin any of these, then you've only ruined a little bit. And I've had comments from several people where it has worked for them, and they've looked at it and they've done a little one, and one indeed said they had 3 out of 4 good paintings, and that is fantastic to hear that. So I wanted to follow that video up with this one, and where I talked last week just briefly about the fact that if you've got some nice images, you could either give them as gifts to friends and family and loved ones, or indeed you would even be able to sell them as a craft fair or online, one of these platforms like Etsy or something like that, and sort of make a little bit of money from them. So what I wanted to do is emphasize this week a little bit more of the product type of thing. Now, for many of you know that I've got a physical gallery in my local town, and for a long time I have been creating little original paintings in abstract form for that gallery, and I put them together and add them to a cardstock. Now, these are easily available from most craft shops and leading manufacturers and paper and art products. You can go online, I'm sure, and find these very, very easily. Now, these are 6x6 and these are 5x7, and you can get this folding this way or indeed that way as well. You can buy the envelopes for them, and you can buy the little crystal plastic self-seal envelopes, you know, the outers to go over the whole thing. And if you want to put a little enclosure in the back telling them about yourself, you can do that too. Now, if there's time in this video, I'm going to show you how I put them together. If not, I'll leave it for a new video next week maybe. But this is the sort of thing that I've been doing. I've taken all my little offcuts of paper, rough edges, torn edges, and I create mini abstracts. This is the whole idea. I create these lovely little abstracts. I then stick them with very careful hands, because it's easy to mess these up. But I put them on there, and whatever way it is, I create a little title and a little signature, and it becomes an original piece of work on a cardstock. And these sizes, 5x7, 6x6, you can indeed buy little frames. So you can sell these to people as greetings cards, blank, for them to send to a friend themselves. But then this could be then framed very cheaply, very easily from one of these cheaper shops that create lots of this sort of frame. And then you can have it hanging on the sideboard or on the wall, and it goes on, has a life beyond that of being merely a greetings card. So that's what I'm going to be doing. What am I using? Well, I've got all sorts of stuff here. I've got a little spray bottle. Some people call it spritzer bottle. I'm not quite sure why, but I call it a spray bottle. And I've got one of my larger ceramic palettes. Now, not all my colors are in here, and I can change my color palette to whatever I want to. I can add additional colors in if I want to. But I've got, let's go through them. I've got indigo, I've got the translucent orange, I've got aureolin, Indian yellow, vermilion, and I've got magenta, I've got cobalt blue, and I've got ultramarine blue. And if I want a bit of a green or a viridian, I can do that as well. So that's off to one side because I wanted to concentrate on this for you. So let's have a look what's underneath. Well, I did these ones this morning, and I wanted to show you them just as a small collection. It took me about 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe a bit longer actually, by the time I taped everything up. Now, I tape these up with washi tape, and you will find that because of the barriers, you tend to waste an awful lot of paper. And that's why I've done this one as an alternative, where I have just literally subdivided up into sizes. Now, what you'll notice is that many of the sizes are much bigger than these ones, because if you're painting something this small, it's nothing to paint something a little bit bigger. But 4x4 goes on a 6x6 card quite nicely, and a 5x3, almost 5x3, goes on the 5x7 card really, really nicely. And the client thinks they're getting quite a lot for their money. These off little cuts, well, they can go on cards as well. The reason that I did it this way to show you is that here, when you're putting tape on, unless you guys know otherwise, I really struggle to get my lines right. And I go off and the tape moves and I don't get them straight. Now, fair's fair. When I take this apart, when I take the tape off, I will trim these down on a paper cutter so they will be square. But they do need to be pretty square to start with. So that's one aspect. And also you can see that I've got 4 of these size on here. These are the 5x3 or thereabouts. And then I've got some much smaller ones. Now on this one, same piece of paper or same size paper, I have got 4 of those 5x3s, but additionally, by not using tape, I've actually got 4 of those size for the square cards, and I've got a couple of offcuts that will not go to waste. Now the thing about this is, of course, you've got no physical barrier for your paint to stop going everywhere, so you do need to be a little bit more careful. But hey, that's my middle name. No, it's not. It's far from it. But there you go. Even the dirt on here will come and be used. And anything that goes over doesn't work, you don't have to use it. You just trim it down, get rid of your pencil lines, trim down the paper. And if it's not quite 4x4 or 5x3, does it really matter? It doesn't really. So I'm going to work from one side. I'm going to work through every painting I do. I don't do a great big abstract and then cut it up. Some people think I do. I don't. I sort of set about making every painting as individual as I possibly can. And I use an awful lot of things to create my paintings. But I am trying to be very, very expressive or abstract with the marks that I make. And I do play around an awful lot. I use a lot of old credit cards, such as this one. And I just think about, I have something in my mind. If this goes off screen, I do apologize. But I do go through all the processes that I can think of. And some of the ones that I've just shown you on the other piece, they're drying off quite nicely from this morning. And I may go back in with them and put some white gel pen ink on them. I might create some more drawn lines, some ink lines, whatever it might be, and have even more fun. If I like what I've got, I probably won't do anything much with it. I will just leave it as it is. And that's the beauty of this, because you're creating something, having heaps of fun doing it. I'm scoring the paper now, so that paint will literally go into those cuts into the surface of the paper and create lovely little marks. I'm going to add in a bit of magenta now, just bring in some more colour. Now, my original lot of these that I did before Christmas, leading through Christmas and early January, the ones that I was doing and selling then in the gallery, they had quite a wintry theme to them. And I'm still pretty much using the same colours as I did then, that small palette. But I've actually tried to think a little bit more colour. I'm trying to think a little bit more spring and introducing some more beautiful spring-like ideas. And I may actually add in a little bit of green to some of these. But I've got a lot of wildflowers in my head and all sorts of other things while I do this. This could be a long video. It may be that part 2 will come a week on, when I take all of these and create a film where I show you how to put these things together and in context, so that you can then do something more with them. But there we go. That's very, very simple, but it's a spray of grasses and new flower growth with the suggestion of a background running through there. It doesn't have to be very, very detailed, and certainly doesn't have to have complete abstraction or indeed complete realism. It is just a beautiful little study which invokes the feeling of spring, colour, grasses and all of those things to the would-be, or hopefully somebody who wants to buy it. I'm just going to put a little spray through there, and I'm just going to come through here now with quite a warm colour. I think we're coming up to a time in our year when we get a lot of rape fields, yellow rapeseed growing in our fields, so I just want to suggest a few of those. It's got a little bit of orange attached to it, and I'm just going to come along. I'm going to drag a fairly thick line of paint through here. I'm going to come up here with little bits of it. In fact, what I do, I just change to the smaller piece, and this is just the same sort of card cut down. Just going to bring that up, and I want to suggest a few tree forms. Now, because we're working in squares, it really doesn't make a lot of odds which orientation, because there is no portrait or landscape, unlike these ones, which will have both of those to think about when you're creating. And you can subdivide your paper up in any which way you really want to. You're not governed by size. I've just worked out that the cardstock that I'm using just works with a nice square size or a rectangle size that I can work with, and I think that's fine. But you can have any size. You know, I've got small bits of paper, as I showed you just now, and they were simply offcuts from other paintings that needed trimming down, and I saved them all because invariably they're good pieces of watercolour paper, not to be thrown away and discarded because that they serve no real purpose, because they make loads of purposes. In fact, I will do one on some of the card that I've got cut from other pieces that will make some beautiful bookmarks with, and that I'm thinking of doing, and just creating certain sizes that you can do lovely little original bookmarks with, and people love that sort of thing. You don't have to charge fortunes for it, but you can have a lovely thriving little craft business as a result of that. So I quite like what that's doing. Let's just spray that out, and I'm going to let that settle a little bit because I like what it's doing. I don't want to take any more spray to it, and I don't really want it to run back in. I'm just going to lift some of the pigment out so that it just goes into that space, creates quite a dynamic shape. That's doing what it's going to do. Now, as I tilt this back down, that paint's going to naturally come this way. Not a problem, because I've got it doing what I want at the top there. I really like what that's just done. Now I'm going to ignite some of this here and let this come down and create something really quite spectacular. There's very little water this side of this, so this is tracking down, joining with this yellow. Really, really strong colour. Just take off the excess there so it doesn't have an influence too much on there. I like that. Now, do you want this to run down? Well, I might do. So I'm going to use a little brush just to tickle that. Let that find its way into there. Let that come down and do very similar things. How far do you let this come down? I'm just going to tease it a little bit more. Look, just by letting that paint touch that paper allows it to come down and through there like that. Now, I'm not going to let that go any further, and so I'm going to deliberately take off excesses. But now, because of that, if you want to, nothing's stopping you tapping in maybe another colour, a little bit of red in here, and creating almost a poppy type field through here, through the dry parts, but where it touches the red, it will bleed, it will spread, it will do all sorts of lovely things. But lovely looks in there. A little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow did that. Nothing more. It doesn't need an awful lot sometimes to create one beautiful, suggestive image, because it doesn't matter what you see. Other people will see other things. I did one of these a few weeks ago, and a lovely lady and her father, I believe, came into the gallery, and they were transfixed by a load of these that I have in my gallery window. And for the long time they were stood outside. I could see them talking things through from my desk. And I was obviously not privy to the conversation, but when they came in, they decided they'd want to buy some of these. And that was great. But the reason they bought one of them was because they could see battleships having a fight, almost, sort of World War II type style battleships, having, well, not fighting necessarily, but they were there. And they could see these. I, for the life of me, couldn't see a battleship at all. But they did. And that's fine. Got nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic when people see other things that suggest something to them. That really is quite special. But here we're creating this beautiful little form. Doesn't have to be too much. And we're getting away from these sort of grassy type things. And remember to take up to the edges of your paper and try not to go over. This one's crept that way a little bit, but it won't have too much of a bearing on any of it. If you want to, just take it off like that with a damp cloth. That's done. It didn't need a lot of work, and I love it. I really do. Okay, let's come back to this one that's got our pre-made sky, as it were. I'm going to pretty much do the same sort of thing again. And I'm going to come in with some dark colour. I'm just going to scratch that through. Let's try and, well, let's keep it up here high again, like the other one. And let's just put in a little bit of colour. Quite like that, and I don't think it really needs any more than that. Let that dry and it will tell its own story. All right, so do I do that again? I think I'm going to, but I quite like this one. I'm attracted back to this one. So I'm going to come in here with another line, but this time I'm going to make it much lower down. And I'm going to have my flourish, as it were, if that's one, the little flush going up into the sky. I'm going to create some trees and some bits of foliage through here. I'm going to drag some of that down by scoring that paper. And even that dirty mark there has now pretty much disappeared. Got our background already done. That's our background. Doesn't take a lot, does it? Coming in here now with some beautiful yellows. Much less of a flush possible. Okay, now then, let's just take that a little warmer. So this could be a bit of a sunset type thing going on. A little bit of red up through there, touch on one or two other places. Maybe even the suggestion of water by having a suggestion of some reflections. Turn that over, see what's left in paint on the other side. Okay, where do we want to take that now? Well, I'm going to spray it. I'm going to tip it this way ever so slightly. Just a little spray. I like these small spray bottles because they are a little more controllable, he says, as he does a great big dollop on that one. Let's get that one moving. There we go. Now be careful, because I don't want that running into this other picture. So I am trying to entice it a little bit. See what happens. But I don't want anything to ruin. They look like a couple of hydras, so I'm not quite happy with that at the moment. So let's just spray that and soften these marks and bring them together a little bit more. There we are. I can live with that a little better. Tapping off the excesses. Alright, quite like what's going on with that, but I think we need a little bit more activity here. Not necessarily there, I want to keep that center. So I'm going to drop that into there, drop that down to there. Now, the old adage is that paint will not go where there is no water to allow it. So that stopped there, that got a little bit damp from me tapping. That's why that happened. I'm going to tap into that, just soften the effect into there. Now that's not going anywhere. The only way that that would suddenly go into the space is if so much water come down that the pressure would be too much. And take that off. There we go. So we've got quite a nice looking little field there. And I feel that maybe some dark pen would go in there and create some more trees type things. So let's just put in a little bit of what could be construed as foliage that I can then pop back in with a sort of thin pen later on just to complete the picture. Maybe a subtle one over here. And I feel that we've got a bit of an abstract landscape going on with this one. Quite like it. But what I want to do is I want to tap in a couple of very heavy bits of yellow paint. Now that will sit there. It will ignite, but it wants to just sit there. And it won't necessarily move too much, but it does excite what's going on. Finger taps just to let that just break out into almost nothing. There we go. Very subtle. Let's get rid of that. Very, very subtle, but I really like what that's just. There we are. We're going to do two horizontal ones for this one. So let's play around with a much longer line through here. Dark indigo. A little bit of yellow. Multicolour. You can pick up so many different colours with this. Right, let's come in with some nice red, he says. Let's scratch some of that red on. Could be a nice banded sky, couldn't it? A nice red evening light. Let's even go down that road. Let's just indulge ourselves with a bit of evening glow sunset colours. Really make this rich painting. Joining it up with the red so that when I do spray it, it will move. There's not going to stay these sort of bands of colour. A little bit of aureolin in there. Now this is the Schwenker one, which is a stable aureolin, unlike some that are quite fugitive and will discolour. But that is going to be our pretty much our sky. So let's just come down a little way. Let's just bring in something tangible as a bit of a horizon line. Now let's spray this up. Let's just see where this goes. Nice blends. Look at that. Lovely sunset already. Just going to let that not go all the way down through. But what I'm going to do is just tip that this way a little bit. Let that sunset flow. There's our sun, look. Right there. Hopefully that won't disappear. If I touch it, it will. And it may still do. But hopefully it won't. Quite like that. Lift that up a little bit. Yes, okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I want to drag these out. I want to have quite a long drawn picture. And it's hard for me to explain, but it's something akin to these, but coming down this way. So I'm going to drag that down. And it's not going to be too much more than what I've done. Almost like there's the cloud, there's the sky, there's our horizon line, and the rest of the place is almost melting down, almost off a cliff edge. But I quite like what that does. But I'm going to help that now. I'm going to actually add in a few taps of darks here and there so that they can flow. Maybe a few darker statements. These are where I'm tapping with the edge, so they are almost neat paint, and they're very hard for the water to start moving them because it's so neat. It's sort of, it will soften them for sure, but it may not necessarily make them move. So I'm going to just reinforce that, and it's almost like very distant trees. See how that softens there? And I'm just going to tap in. It won't go too far, which is the beauty. Just creating a little bit of height. If it does spread, just make some slightly higher trees like that. Tap that back a little bit. Just very gently. There we go. Now, if you want to further spray into that, now's the time. So I'm just going to quite literally pop. Just want to ignite the bottom of that. Don't want to go too mad. Could use a dropper. If you've got a little plastic pipette, you can do that with that as well. I don't have one to hand. I have plenty of them, but not one here. Right, just a little pipette. Just drop that into place here and there. Just let it touch. You have a little bit more control than you do have with the spray. And it will just ignite the paint in places. Just disturbing it and allowing it to flow a little more. Almost using the pipette to scratch it down as well, quite like that. This is all there's a little too much, got to be fair. Just arrest that. I quite like that. It's almost African. Tongue in cheek, but it's almost like African in look. I'm just going to tap and put a little bit of paint on the end of the pipette, if I was honest with you. And that just, to me, just allow that to come down. And you get some very, very fine lines with the pipette. There's water in it. It's almost probably like a brush pen would be the closest thing that I can think. If you haven't got a pipette, use a brush pen if you've got one. And you've got a very, very similar effect to it. I'm just dragging that down like that. I don't think it needs to be any more than that. I quite like that. Very strong, very ethereal, sorry. So I quite like that. It's very, very strong of colour, and it gives and emits an awful lot of feeling. So I'm quite happy with that. All right, now once these are all dry, then sign them. I only initial these because they're not very big. So I don't tend to put too much in terms of a signature on them. I'm going to come back with those same red colours again, that vermilion, and I'm going to run all the way through both of these now. Now they're going to be cut down, but I quite like what that did, and try and replicate it on a narrower painting like that. But this time I'm going to come in with a deeper red at the end of the day when that sun's pretty much disappeared, with a little touch of yellow above it. We get a little bit of yellow in there. Now I got to say, this is the closest part of the whole process that I've shown you that has come to almost giving some form of representational painting to the process. And forgive me for that, it wasn't intended, but it did, however, come to pass. I'm not unhappy with it. Move that away from the panel here, so I can just activate or stop any of that resting on the bottom there. It's quite a heavy sunset, isn't it? Just arresting some of that there, softening it. All right, now I'm going to pick up a little bit of, didn't mean that to happen, but things do. Right or wrong, that's not so bad anyway, it's not the end of the world. Just going to drop in a little bit of pigment from the dropper through here. Let it run back this way ever so slightly. Very, very rich in colour. But I like it, I've got to say. Now I'm going to leave that just to settle down. There's a little bit of yellow just poking through there I didn't want. I'm going to leave that to settle down now, let those dry, and depending on what I see, along with the ones that I did earlier, I may come back in with doing a little pen, and then we'll talk about cutting them down and putting them onto cardstock. Hi everybody, and a warm welcome back. Now for me, this is probably the worst part of the whole process because I'm not exactly good at keeping things clean and tidy and efficient, and I do suffer with this. And I know a lot of people do this sort of thing all the time, and they're very used to keeping everything really, really neat. Now, one other thing, I've got everything set out, and this is not normally how I do it because this is just happened to show you. This is where I've got my cameras, so This is why I've got it set up in this very small space. But what I've got here are some enclosures that I put into my cards. They're simply telling people what it's about and what they're about. I have series of the cellophanes which are ready to go. They can be a pain as well, getting those little sealy bits off there. They're very electrostatic. And over here I've got envelopes and I've got the cardstock. Now I am missing one cardstock which I'm going to have to get stopped for, but these are the cards. They are fairly cheap to buy. You can get them from most craft shops and they are pre-pressed, so you've literally got to fold them and crease them and they're done. Now I've got these square ones to go on these square cards. There's only 4 of those in this occasion, but they will go on there like that. And once these are dried and done, then I will simply title them underneath and give a little signature. So what do? Well, this is the bit that gets a bit messy because all I use is a Yoo-hoo stick. Now, there may well be a better way to do it. And if there is, please put it in the comment section underneath this video. I'd love to know how you may tackle this subject, because I find it quite annoying because you've got to keep replacing this paper, because obviously if you don't get this down in the right place each and every time, then you do stand the chance of getting glue on the face of your painting. And I've got to make sure that the whole of this area is covered in glue. It may be that I go to a spray glue. I might try that. I haven't done yet, something like a 3M, but it does tend to be fairly expensive. What I might do is just bring that down a little more central on this occasion. But I'm thinking that these will look better if they were a little bit like this, where they got a little even room around them and they can go into a picture frame without causing too much sort of off-centeredness, unevenness, whatever way you want to call it. But I think that works like that. So that will now set up and dry. That's the trouble with the stick. It does sort of push a bit of glue to the edge, but hopefully that will be fine. And that will sit there and we'll put the next one together. Okay everybody, welcome back. Just a quick last look at the product now they're finished, and you can see that they have been titled and signed, and they put into their clear plastic wrappers and sealed off. They've got the enclosures in the back telling the new owner all about the card, how they're produced, and the contact information to me. Now these will be going onto my website and onto my Etsy site at some point in the very near future. All the scanning has been done, and they will have a product launch very, very soon. And these will be retailing at £12.50. And if the first lot and the earlier lot than that, the first 2 lots that actually went out, are anything to go by, these won't be hanging around very, very long. Okay, everybody, well, I had a lot of fun doing that. I have created about another 28, 30 different products for my gallery, and they have been completely copied onto scans, and they will appear as small prints. They will go onto my Etsy shop, and indeed they will find their way to other platforms too. And I do hope that you'll decide to give it a go. And it doesn't have to be prime pieces of paper. Any offcuts that you have, save them and put them away to one side, and when you get 5 minutes, have a play. Enjoy the process, and you can create lots of wonderful gifts. And so you don't have to think about selling products. but you can create lovely gifts to give away to friends and family and loved ones. So with all that said, if you did enjoy this process, if you enjoyed this video and any others that I do, please give it a big thumbs up. It really does help the YouTube algorithm. It does tell it that it's a channel worth promoting, so that really does help me grow and reach a much wider audience. And while you're at it, if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me immensely, and I'd appreciate that from you. That would be fantastic. And at the same time, don't forget, I have got an active Patreon, so if you want to get involved with that, love to see you over there. There are a lot of tiers involved, and you don't have to spend that much a month. And it is, of course, opt-in, opt-out. You don't have to stay there for any contractual length of time. And at the same time, many of the videos are becoming more and more absolutely exclusive, at least for a period of 6 months from when they're uploaded. So well worth getting involved, and if you want to join it, I'd love to greet you as my latest patron. And don't forget, there is, I keep saying that, my Sky course is available over on my website. Have a look at that. It's only £67 for over 7 hours of content. Lots to learn, lots to enjoy, and I'd love to see you there and help you out with painting skies in watercolour. Until then, I will wish each and every one of you all the best. Happy painting. Stay safe wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Stuck in there. And today I'm following on from some ideas from last week. What? No, I'm not playing ball with you. No. Soon. Go on, go and lay down and be patient. Be patient. I know. Go and be patient. Go on. No. Go lay down. Go lay down. Why don't you listen to what I say? I know. Go on, go and lay down. You're going to have to stop upstaging me. Go on. Go lay down. Please. No. Go on, go and lay down.